Feels like I'm on my. Okay. Testing. Are we there? I see one additional person, or is that just us? Cool. I think we're in.
I think we got it.
Technical difficulties this morning, guys. I'm so sorry about that. I think we're in. Just waiting for more people to get in. Thanks for being here. Yeah, send a proof of life in the chat just so I can see that we're all here. Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you for being here. I'm excited. I have a guest, obviously. What's the subject today? We kind of wanted this to be like a webinar. I think a lot of you, if you've been following my work, obviously know that I talk about creativity, obviously know that something that I'm very passionate about is the body and finding really strange ways to talk about the body in relation to creativity and in relation to living. The name of my platform is Life is Art. I am here with my favorite acupuncturist, if you can, I don't know if that's a flattering title for you, Christian. Um, Jedi of acupuncturist. We want to talk about, we gotta get a little weird talking about creativity, um, autoimmunity, lessons about autoimmunity for creativity, for living, and how to kind of support ourselves in creativity with strange tools. I'm the strange tools resource girly. So, Christian, why don't I let you introduce yourself? And then as you guys hear us talking, we're just going to start rapping. But we definitely want this to kind of just be webinar style. Ask some questions. We're talking about the body. We're talking about autoimmunity. Let us know what questions you have as you hear us rapping back and forth. If you're able to, I know a lot of you guys are probably at work. But yeah, Christian, why don't you introduce yourself? And video and sound is good, chat?
I can hear you, so I'll confirm that. Yeah, I am a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and I don't even know how many years I've been in practice at this point, but enough to know some things. That's what we'll say. And yeah, it's been a long journey to get here, for my own personal story, and it is time for me to share more about that. And some of that is what Vanessa was saying, like weird body tips and tricks to be able to ultimately create more freedom in the body, to be able to get, whether it's your creative art out into the world, or to ultimately feel better and have better conversations with the people in your life, to feel more connected. Ultimately, all roads lead to Rome when it comes to working on your body, and whether that's somatic work or the inputs that you're giving it from your thoughts to your daily habits, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that kind of comes up just as we're riffing here is how difficult it is sometimes to even get your creative project out into the world. And one of the things that is involved with my work, a lot of the work that we do is through like somatic exercises. In the acupuncture space, it is effectively somatic. Soma just means body. And a lot of the way that acupuncture works, and this is not even studied all that often, but it changes pressure in the body. So, for instance, like if you put a needle in your left forearm, you are creating a pressure shift that might also influence your right shin. So a lot of opposites work in the body. But in expressing your art and moving through the world, there's a lot of pressures that become dense in the body. And it's your job as a human to ultimately be able to learn how to navigate that pressure or get good at understanding the density of situations and trying to sit in the discomfort of it all and ultimately still be in the world while you're participating in it. And so through practice, whether it's mindfulness, acupuncture, or various different styles of body work, um, I believe that a lot of that is possible to ultimately create a better life and become a better version of yourself.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. How did you get into thinking about the body in this way? Like obviously acupuncture, Chinese medicine school is a rigorous set of training. I don't know if people know that actually, that like I mean everyone hears about Chinese medicine. I think maybe their engagement if you don't have a great acupuncturist, I think that the way that like the common manner of considering acupuncturist is just like the guy who pokes you. But I think one that people really fail to understand the complexity of the Chinese medicine education. But my question for you is outside of that, how and why did you get into that? Why did you start to crave like the need for that level of depth?
Yeah. Um, Real simply, I was really, really sick when I was younger. I had autoimmunity that was influenced pretty much every part of my life, whether it was obvious or not. I knew it, and there, there's a certain point where you can only go to so many doctor's appointments and get the same result of being like, "Hey, take this medication. It might have side effects. Hey, we can't help you all that much. We don't even know what's going on." Um, and I just got sick of the disease model. I didn't
Mm,
somewhere inside of my being, I felt like there had to be more, and often that's kind of the big distinguisher of like people that seek alternative routes is there's a feeling inside of themselves where they're like, hey, like this actually can't be, and I fail to accept that this is the way my life is just going to be if I just go from doctor appointment to doctor appointment to doctor appointment, because that's a disease model. They're there to
mm,
diagnose and prescribe or treat. And yeah, ultimately, I just, over the course of time, I realized that like I was never going to see that something was eternally and forever wrong with me, that I was going to climb out of it and figure out a way if it was the last thing that I did, because the alternative felt like it was just a slow and steady death.
And I
But
think that
the
that's an interesting, if I can, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think for a lot of people, I'm sure there's a lot of people in my community who are either live with us now or will watch it later that relate to that, certainly relate to the experience in the body. But I think there's an interesting parallel for someone to start addressing, which I'm glad we're talking about. That's why I wanted us to talk. What you said about, I forget exactly the language that you used already, but like this, I was determined and I was not going to accept the slow progress. I'm paraphrasing terribly because you said it more poetically than I can, but there was this aspect of you that could not accept the slow progress and the slow progress that you attribute to the disease model. And I think that there's some wisdom in that for creative people, because creativity, at least in on my platform, is not just the content that you create or the PDF that you want to sell on Etsy. Creativity is this larger project of the soul, of the body, of the soul and body. And I think that the wisdom that you have of someone who's encountered really grave autoimmune experiences, both in the physical experience, but also in navigating it in the matrix, in the world with different practitioners. I feel like you have wisdom for all of us. Um, but yeah, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to punctuate that for our discussion, but continue as however you see fit.
Yeah, I mean, we could go so many ways with it, but the fullness of what I believe is ultimately that um, some of this was my karma. So, like, I had this
Nice.
experience that, um, although challenging and difficult, um, it was a process of me to discover, very similar to art, of like what's inside myself. Uh, I might have like a little bit of a wish that it was more of a creative process, you know, like of a discovery.
Mm.
It was more survival process. But like I had to figure out what was going on inside of me. And what I believe is that the body hosts stories. So if something terrible happens to you, a layer gets stuck here. And then let's say you go through a heartbreak and something gets stuck here. And then you have it in all these different areas and parts of the body, but they're layers. And we know these layers today to be fascia. And so um, these stories get stuck inside of your tissues. And it's very common that someone will be on my table and cry, or they'll reveal something and make a connection in their life, and that they'll shed tears about something that they had left a browser tab open on in their life, and not fully processed.
Mm.
And I think we all come into this world with a story to live, and probably sometimes one that we forgot. And through your work, I've been through your courses. It's about a lot about remembering, um,
Mm.
that somewhere deep down, we're on this journey to discover those stories and to shed some of them, and to ultimately create more freedom to be able to get to the ultimate space of be able to create, rather than be on defense of discovering the entire time.
That's interesting. So again, I'm thinking about creative people, but I'm also thinking about, a bit of my story, and something, a reason why I think that we work so well together in this kind of kismet way is obviously you have this background and this education in this alternative manner of approaching life, medicine, nutrition, healing, even things like soil, water, whatever that you want to talk about, the environment, community, through your own experience with autoimmunity. I have almost the inverse of that. My mother passed away from very grave autoimmunity. For those who don't know, I'm going to start talking about this more on my channel. But my mother had lupus, and yeah, it killed her. Just to be, kind of crude. But she fought for a long time. But I remember as a child, she died when I was 21. She was diagnosed at my birth. Um, the drama, the lore of it was that she was given 1 week to live by her doctor. She had this intense flare up of lupus, going from at least what looked like perfect health. It wasn't, as we know in hindsight, but perfect health. She was very healthy. She was athletic. She was in great shape. She had lots of energy, lots of joy. And then after labor, or just in the last month of pregnancy, her body's turned on her, um, to the point of, according to her doctors, no recovery. And again, this was lupus, which I think some people say, tell me if I'm wrong, is one of the difficult types of autoimmunity because of how difficult it is, how aggressive it is, how it masquerades as other things that are almost impossible to catch and name. But her doctors gave her 1 week to live, and she passed when I was 21. And in that experience of me witnessing that, there's lots of trauma we can talk about, but I'd rather not. The I learned a lot at an early age about how to support somebody that sensitive, how
Mm.
to view somebody who is sick. Um, what I there's something, and it's not something I've been able to hold on to. I had to revisit this truth when I was and does when you heal from all your childhood trauma. You come back later to discover the grace that your parents had. But my mom was incredibly sensitive spiritually. She had incredible gifts. And I feel like there's a relationship between gifts and sensitivity and autoimmunity. And I don't know, like this is a complex subject, so help me out. But I feel like if more people appreciated, in the same way that I think that if more people appreciated what autoimmunity is, what autoimmunity means, like what that autoimmunity reveals about someone who's that sick, their sensitivity, their gifts. The more people knew about that, the more that they would have the environment to heal. And I think that there's something, I don't know, to pull out about creativity about that, but I feel like we have to get weird. So forgive me. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. Oh, um, I mean, I can confirm the sensitivity. We can start there. Like, anyone who has autoimmunity, I have yet to work with a patient who has had autoimmunity who hasn't been through something very serious in their childhood, often in the form of like abuse and neglect. And um, what I believe happens in those moments is that someone's body, both energetically and maybe physically, has been like disrupted. Something has like pierced their system in a way where they are no longer the most important part of uh, their experience because they have to be viewing the world and their environment in a hypersensitive way to ultimately have an eye out where like the next piece of danger could be or how they might be able to get their needs in secondary form if it's neglect. And um, I don't know if there's a human on planet Earth who hasn't had some kind of experience in that department. And of course, artists have a similar sensitivity. It just comes often with a form of a medium to be able to express and to move the energy. But um, yeah, I'm not sure how far we want to go down that rabbit hole. Is that like that part of?
Go for it.
Yeah, we want to keep going. Okay. So
Yeah. I would say
at
unleash your autism, whatever you want to say.
yeah, so like if you have this sensitivity and your energetic body has been penetrated, it's almost like that there's uh, it's easier for information to come into your system from the environment. So it's almost like your spirit has made an agreement to uh, have damage to the health of your constitution in order to receive more information for the protection of the vessel throughout the long term. And in that,
Jeez.
um, it's then super easy to become overwhelmed. And if you become an adult and you haven't handled that, you still have all of the sensitivities, plus the history of things being unprocessed, and then all of the information of modern day society that isn't really congruent with biology, whether that's EMFs or, hey, friends that are stealing your energy and they just are taking advantage of your sensitivity and they want you to fill their needs. But really, the inverse relationship is what you need, which is someone to attune to yours. And it first starts with your own self. But you have to have you have to have a magnifying glass on your life to scope through the environmental stimulus that is creating the burden or overwhelm. And it's not a task for the weak in any stretch of the means. And it's not fun. It's not sexy. And um, yeah, I think some of these topics of like what you talk about and what I live and breathe on a day to day is ultimately like you also just can't stay in that space of um, doing the patchwork on your environment and life. Like you either sometimes have to like bring people into your life that have a more joyous energy, or there's more fun involved, or you have to find projects that you're involved in that bring you some kind of variance that feels good
Yeah.
because you're so used to just constantly being on the defense. And yeah, that's a big thing that I ultimately like. Sometimes it takes years. Truthfully, most of the time it does, to take people from being on defense to understanding how to do the patchwork of their life and their environment, to ask for their needs, to ultimately like going out and living in the world and living a life that feels good, and being more at the helm
Yeah.
of creating rather than
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I just something that came through for me, like I felt this and I don't, I mean, even talking to you privately about it, I don't know why I've not said it this succinctly until how it's coming now, but I firmly believe and have believed that the reason if I can say this about myself, you guys can talk shit and disagree with me in the chat if you disagree, if I'm wrong, but I believe that I am quite effective at helping creative people. I believe I'm quite effective at, and it's not like at the level of helping somebody who already has an Oscar or a, a whole team. It's these people that have this genius inside of them, which is a feature of their sensitivity. It's a feature of this pattern recognition that they have that is deep in their body, this ability to record stories, make sense of things, to hold on to things. That's what a creative person is. They're profoundly sensitive. And I believe that the reason I'm so fucking good at that, if I can say that, is because I have this curriculum of watching my mother. I can s- I c- of again. There's a thousand ways in that her illness, made her an irresponsible mother. But we don't. I mean, I've already cried about that for in the last decade of my life. You know what I mean? And I've made peace with it. But trying to look forward and trying to do what I do that I believe in is you are given as an artist, which I am, which everybody who's listening is, you were given a curriculum in your life, that life is art. And that I believe that part of my curriculum was how to support creative people as a practitioner, as an individual person, as a renegade fake professor on the internet, as an online coach, whatever you want to call me. But even further, how do we as a collective support creativity in the collective? And I feel like there's wisdom for us to pull out
Mm.
for the first time, maybe. I don't know if a lot of people are writing about the autistic ass connection between creativity and autoimmunity, but I believe that I'm good at this because I was a stabilizing force as a child, which is maybe not a child's role to a parent. We can talk about that on another live. But I was a stabilizing force to my mother's with with autoimmunity has in their body because one, they're sensitive from jump, and two, having to manage and mitigate such a confusing, complex um, illness. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling. Like yeah, I don't know why I didn't put that together until now, but I believe there's an important conversation to be people with autoimmunity. How does a person with autoimmunity become well? If it's obviously like I think what's at the top of like at the forefront, but I think what's at the forefront of the discussion is things like nutrition, eliminating inflammation. All of that, however, rests on the responsibility of the person who's sick.
Hmm.
Sick. And I just feel like what a person with autoimmunity needs is the environment in which to be well. And that cannot be a task that rests on the shoulders strictly of the person who's sick. And that responsibility is something that I certainly apply in my work. That if you've been in my classes, if we've worked together, if you've been one of my students, I lift a lot. And I don't know. I don't know if you relate to that or if that feels like anything or if anybody in the chat feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, the thing the thing that stands out for me in all that is people who are sick or have chronic illness or who have autoimmunity. They're not the only type of sensitive person. Um, uh, and in my space, there's a doctor that I really like who she talks about it as those folks being the canary in the coal mine, where before
mm,
everyone else in the coal mine dies because of lack of oxygen, the canary will start making noise so everyone else can start to flee the coal mine. So for the safety of everyone else. And people that are sick or that are sensitive and creatives are also the canaries in the coal mine for society. So it is in some ways our responsibility to stand up and to um, not necessarily like seek justice for the inhumane things that are happening in the world, but um, to play your part and speaking up and being like, hey, like this isn't okay. The the pesticides in our food, the overwhelm of emotional stimulus, or hey, that person's energy is super abusive in this room. Like, can we like talk about that, or can we have a conversation about it, or you know, it it's ultimately information that the person who is sensitive is channeling to ultimately try to make the world a better place. And
Yes.
I don't
Yes.
think that I think that
Sorry,
it's
guys.
very um, like your mom is very lucky to have had someone like you to be able to pick up on her sensitivity and ultimately being able to help out with some of that stimulus or that environmental change to be what a person needs. I mean, it's an
Mm,
incredible responsibility, and I don't necessarily think that it is everyone's job in the life of a sick person to ultimately make every single change. But if they can be of some support, yeah, I think that it makes total sense to me why you do what you do, because you had the pattern recognition of someone who was super sensitive. So therefore, you had to be just as, if not more, sensitive to be able to be what was needed in the environment. And then ultimately now you've had this passion and maybe even a gift in the space of opera singing and art, and ultimately to be able to show up to that same space and recognize that the pattern is across all fields. That um, I even had this thing. I had this
mm.
rant yesterday. I have it here in a book that I wrote down.
Yeah,
Um,
tap in.
but it it just talks about like how the micro equals the macro. So um, so there's a theory called systems theory, or it's the same thing as like the butterfly effect. So when something happens in the universe, it basically or in an environment. So let's say this is me, and ultimately, like this is Vanessa. So she's in the room, right? So when I move, Vanessa moves in relation to that. Okay, and it's saying that almost all particles in the environment are picking up on that stimuli and making at like the microscopic level some adjustment. And so that's the
Yeah.
butterfly effect. That's systems theory. Um, and the funny thing is like in the body, there's this term called tensegrity, and it's becoming more and more well known. But it's the same thing. So there's this like famous image. I don't know if you've seen it, but it has like a bunch of prongs and sticks, and then there's a bunch of like strings that are attached to it. So when you move one string,
Okay.
the other strings all have to pull an adjustment to that. And so in the fascia world, I'll give you a visual. So if I have an injury, and let's say this is my knee, but the tissue that surrounds the knee has to then be more compact and it has to twist to create protection. Now, do you guys see how every line in my shirt now has adjusted to relation of this? So that's the term tensegrity, is that basically saying everything in the body is connected. But it goes a little bit further, like um, same happens in families, right? So this is like a family dynamic kind of situation. So everyone took on a role, right? Like maybe your brother was the funny one, or um, hey, you took up sensitivity in the sense of providing for someone's needs. But everyone in relation to that family is kind of like you guys are all uh, Tai Chi masters of like moving the energy, but you're doing it in a way that typically was a defense mechanism or a response rather than a Jedi level of like, hey, let's stand in the difficulty together and say the thing that matters, you're just kind of being a little neurotic about the response. And it's not,
Wait, so you're saying that you're saying that there's an analogy. It's not even an analogy. There's just actually the same observable pattern within nature that you're saying you did this shirt thing, where there's this tensegrity, tension integrity is what I heard. I don't know if that's right, but
yeah.
tensegrity in the physical body through fascia, where the whole thing is everything is bound up together. You can't
Mm,
touch and move one part without moving the whole of your body. And in the
mhm,
same way, you're saying that family dynamics are governed by that same pattern,
mhm,
strung together through the subtle body, the emotional body, emotions, stories, all types of shit. And what happens to a sensitive person in the case that we're talking about, either a creative or a person with autoimmunity, is that the sensitive, that the person with autoimmunity has, say this part, so explain this part, that somebody, that they have an impact on the whole family. Can you help? Can you redo that part?
yeah. So in the tensegrity or butterfly effect, it's like they're picking up on all the sensitivity in their environment. So they'd be like, okay,
Wow.
uh, dad is angry because his dad died when he was really young. So therefore, he's harnessing some of that anger in the house. And the sensitive person or the person with autoimmunity is a reflection of the health of the environment, saying like, "Hey,
Wow.
I have to reflexively change who I am to maneuver dad's energy
And
because
that done over tension at extreme levels, if a child done that, having to mitigate that family friction, those family
yeah,
dynamics, before the child has language, before the child has support, a child having to do that under extreme tension internalizes that in the body, thus creating autoimmunity.
yeah, they have to contort themselves and create tension. Is just
They
like you were
have to
saying.
contort
They
themselves
they
to
have
bear the
to
load.
to use your words. They have to basically change their integrity and create tension, right? Integrity and tension, tensegrity, like you were saying. Like,
They have to fuck. Hold on, just give us a second. I don't know if you can see the chat. Say it, just repeat it because it's good enough to repeat. Say it again.
so I mean, you started it, but it's very, very true. So tensegrity, the two words being tension and integrity. A sick person has to change the integrity of the autonomy of their being for the greater good of the whole by creating further tension in their system. But that tension happens in the tissue, and most autoimmune issues are created in the fascia. So yeah, it's the same, but different. Are you still there? You're breaking up a little bit. You're frozen. I don't know if the chat can hear me. No? Mm, I can hear you now. Maybe the yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the beauty of this though, right? So like rather than thinking about the problem of it all, now you're back. Um, the beauty of this is that so in the tensegrity environment, right? Like one, yeah. So the beauty of the tensegrity explanation is that if one peg on the rung changes, the entire environment changes. So the difficulty is most of the time it's the person that's most sensitive, that the one that has to make the change because they're the one picking up on the information of the neurotic behavior. Um, so therefore, Correct. Well, well, often, I mean, the black sheep analogy is a good one because the fullness of like, if we had a linear line to try to be able to solve it, it would be that, hey, everyone sits in a room and we acknowledge we're participating in these roles, and everyone has the humility to be able to both share their experience and also admit where they're wrong, um, and sit through the discomfort of that and allowing the dynamic to change, not by necessarily doing anything, but acknowledging it and allowing it to off gas. It's like the spiritual context of it would be like in um, zazen meditation, or when you're sitting like a classic 10-day vipassana, you're literally sitting doing nothing. Like absolutely nothing is what the goal is for the 10 days. But your thoughts go crazy. You recognize that almost like somewhere between 60 to 80% of your thoughts are the same every day. And we have about, I think it's like 80,000 thoughts a day. But as that's happening, the tension in your body and your mind starts to undo itself by just nature of just sitting there and allowing and witnessing. So I believe that if dynamics had the ability and the courage to like sit in all of that, it would just ultimately off gas and unwind in and of itself. But the way it works in real life application is most of the time the sensitive person has to make change and confront, whether it's like the abuser or a person who's not like meeting their needs, and start to have difficult conversations. And then a seed is planted because then that person goes, hey, you're disrupting my reality and the way that I go about the world, and you're saying I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, that has to reconstruct the way that I've basically created a sense of self to walk through the world for my own sense of security. So you can't do it in one stop shop. So you're like ultimately like, hey, drop a seed. Okay, next
So
one.
you're saying if a person with autoimmunity or the black sheep, creative person, whatever, is not in an environment where they're the other people, the healthy people, so to speak, the other people who are tethered to this tension integrity,
Yeah,
if they're not in an environment where the other people on the end of that tension rope are willing
yeah,
to accept something, what happens is
yeah.
further disarray, chaos, further, what is that word that you use? Loss of integrity within their self.
It's the opposite. So they're actually creating more integrity by speaking about it if you're the sensitive one,
Sure, sure,
though.
sure, sure. But I'm saying if it's not received properly by the environment,
Yeah, yeah.
even that person, that incredible gesture to speak up for yourself, to advocate for your needs, to try to articulate, for example, the difficulty of being creative, the difficulty of dealing with autoimmunity, the incredible confusion, the complexity, the contradiction that you can experience in your body. If once that person is willing to express that, that black sheep has the courage to express that, which is itself a Herculean gesture towards healing. If the
Yes.
environment does not receive that,
It won't. For the record, it won't. Not well.
not well.
Almost
No,
always.
that's historically. Now let's talk about that. Let's get deeper. Why? Why do they not receive it well? You can go anywhere, I think, but let's talk
so
about why.
so 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 I just said it right, which is ultimately you're shaking up their sense of self, because who they are and the way they're
Yes.
responding is also ultimately a result of their experiences and not fully their conscious choice. So when you start disrupting this and you start to ask for change, there's saying, hey, I don't want to. I don't want to. This is the way that
Right.
I've done it, et cetera, et cetera. And you're threatening literally their whole concept of reality by, that's what their psyche created. That's what their body is holding. as this is how I protected myself to get through the world. And like, if you look at it even from like a sociological perspective, it's like, okay, we're not even 100 years removed from like world wars, right? So like
Yes.
you have people that were going through like extreme psychological damage, and they just started to like rip it and grip it to get through the world. And so that is the way, and they don't want to shake it up. They don't want to have to change because it's how they survived. So every unit in the family is going about things from a survival perspective. So the instance of when you are the person who ultimately is, hey, I'm done with this, like I need to make changes, I need to speak up, I want to like change the environment, hey, can we have an honest conversation? If people are not willing to change, which often they don't because it's threatening, then here's what happens. So it's the same thing as this analogy, right? So here's you, here's the injury, you've acknowledged, hey, I want to unwind this. Okay. So literally, as you see this creates a spiral, right? So what you then do as you create change is you've just inserted a moment of chaos by change. So just like the universe is order and chaos, equal parts, yin yang, then as you do this, you're spiraling out of it, which ultimately means the tension that was created through that, you're going to go
This
through
is nuts.
almost every family dynamic that you've ever been a part of that will undo the reality of every person's constructs. So therefore there will be chaos. So when you're trying to create change, just expect the chaos. So it's your responsibility as the person who wants to make change to be like, I'm disrupting this. I'm actually the disruptor. What is a creative person? A disruptor. That is your
Correct.
job. Your
Correct.
job is to disrupt. So
Yes.
like as you do this, as you choose to be courageous and make changes in your life, expect disruption. So where the sick person gets more sick is the attachment to the idea that they're then no longer loved because they're not playing this role. So they actually get more sick because they're a person that goes, hey, I played this role for forever. This what kept me safe and sound. And now that I'm not playing this role, mom and dad is mad at me. My sister thinks I'm a bitch, or like whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
the reality of it is that you're no longer allowing them to participate in the environment the way that it was. So disruption is going to happen. That's the goal. The goal is to disrupt and allow things to shift and change. And ultimately, over time, you will continually, reiteratively go through a spiral of cycles. So, like the first time is it'll be chaos. It'll be like, all right, like I saw someone said, hey, I need to separate. Like, is the question to separate from my family? The answer is no. Like, you might need temporary space, but like, is that the answer? No, because if you move halfway across the globe, the energy of who you are is still made up of the dynamic of what created you in that environment. So
Yes. You're
you can
still you're still in that same shape if
you
you
can
move
go
past it.
feel better
Yeah.
in different environments and you can choose that. And if you're okay with the choice of that because you want to respect yourself so much, that's great. I respect that to nth degree. But the in my opinion, it's the example of like when you have gone through your history of dating, have you recognized that like, oh, I still am butting up against a similar pattern, right? Like, oh, I'm still dealing with my own attachment wounds. Oh, like I'm still unwilling to let go of control. Like whatever it
Wow.
is, each person that you date, it might get a little better, and you might need a new environment because a new person has different inputs for your system, or their environment might feel more safe. But ultimately, you still have the tensegrity or the pattern that you're undoing to work through your own chaos. And that's kind of the point
That's
of life.
yeah. That is the point of life. So, and people are loving this in the chat. I don't know if you can see it or you're just kind of doing your autistic thing. But somebody asked a question. Thank you for the gift, Vixen. Vixen 9 8. Sorry. Um, it says, will it be a lifetime of undoing the damage? There's a lot of questions in the chat about, and I want to address this. I just want to make sure people are getting what you're saying. There's a lot of questions about the black sheep has to leave, the black sheep has to heal, the black sheep has to undo the damage. But what we're trying to call attention to is the responsibility on the environment, on the person, on the person around that person, that sensitive person. But there's a direct question to us: will it be a lifetime of undoing the damage? Big question.
I think that there's two answers to that. The answer is obviously yes. Like you never stop learning as a person until the day you die. You will
Right.
go through moments in your life of challenge, of waves, of your curriculum in this life. But it's been my experience that like I'll give you a personal one, that like for the longest time I needed space for my family, and I moved across the country. I uh, chose to live my own life, and I needed that space to be able to understand how I was participating in things, because ultimately it's
Mm,
like it also sounds way easier when I say that than like actually undoing the pattern, because the pattern is stuck in your body and you feel the density. So when you walk into that environment, you might go into it and being like, hey, I'm going to tell them that this is not okay with me, and then you go in there and you
mhm,
feel really small and you're like, oh, they're going to be mad at me, I'm going to be a shell of myself here. Or then it comes out and you're like, and then you yell, and then you look like the person who is kind of being the a-hole. But like
mm,
the reality is that through time and space and choosing to continually work through those patterns, that you can reintroduce yourself fully into that environment and be like, hey, um, I want to have the conversations we never had, or
mm,
um, ultimately you, the person who has done healing and worked on yourself in these stories, and you've worked on your body, you can go into the environment and not demand change, but you can, similar to the beginning of this conversation, get more comfortable with the pressures of the environment, and to be able to work it through your body and still demand that you hold your own self with an integrity and say, hey,
yes.
I don't accept that, or hey, I want to talk about that, or um, hey, I walked out of a phone call and like that went better than it ever went because I was better
Yes.
and I asked the questions that I wanted to ask.
Yes.
And it's my experience that you eventually get to a space that is closer to homeostasis or more balance, where you get to lean into harder conversations. And the beauty of that is that it creates more intimacy. And that's ultimately what
Mm.
sick people want a lot of the time anyways, is to feel more connected.
Mm, yeah, I have this memory coming up with my mother. It's just this interesting experience, and I'm sure the black sheep in the chat will relate, but certainly my mom was a black sheep, obviously for a number of reasons, but then just isolating the experience when she was sick. It's like the illness itself became something. Cancer, which I've dealt with too, is different. Injuries are different. There's exhaustion when you're having to be the caretaker for people. It's demoralizing. You get that, if there's not a lot of good news in a person's life for stuff like that. And so of course it's demoralizing. But what I really observed is how triggering that person's illness, my mother's illness, was to my family. And that's not to call them bad people, but like it just was. And there was this incredible starvation of compassion. There is this there is this incredible lack of acceptance. And I distinguish acceptance from tolerance. There's this I was talking about this with a friend last night, that acceptance is something that tolerance is not as strong of a as a disposition of the heart as acceptance, where acceptance kind of brings the person that you accept, you bring them in the room with you. I accept that you're having a tantrum versus tolerating it. I don't know if that distinction is clear to other people as it is to me as I articulate it, but like my point is that there was this critical lack of acceptance of things, which is hard. It's hard to accept when your child is sick, for example. That's tough, if not impossible. But even further, there's this canary aspect of my mother that was impossible for my family to accept. And I always say, to your point, that like my mother, there was no there were every Western intervention was given to her, and some of it worked, some of it didn't. Some of it caused more pain than it helped. But I always say that if she could have just had a space for 5 people to go off to some cabin in the woods and have 6 people sitting around her and just listening to her. Hey, how do you feel? What's going on? How does it feel to carry this? What's the worst thought you've had? What's the worst thing that happened? Where do you think this came from? What does it feel like? Just listen to her and hold her and embrace her. I firmly believe, feeling what I feel as her daughter, I can feel her beingness in my bones, etc. If she just had an environment for someone to just listen and give her a hug for 5 consecutive days, you're on a week long retreat to be listened to and held. That would have done more for her autoimmunity than anything. And yeah, I just feel like, yeah, I feel like that's something that I've done in my community is like having, like, there's not a creative person that comes through into my whatever, into my classroom. And they tell me some idea, and the creative idea that they have is buried underneath years, decades of fear, decades of doubt, excuses, failures, etc., idiosyncratic nonsense, whatever. But what I do well is I listen to the idea. I can feel the potency of the idea, regardless of how much they sabotage, how much they're afraid, something like that. I can just listen and I can hear it. And it's like that well in a person, the dignity, the purity, the unconditionally perfect aspect of a person, be it their creative idea, the creative integrity, or their wellness in general, is something that really needs to be rigorously defended by their environment. That I say this in my community, that even if you're sick, you're still well. You know what I mean? You might be in pain, but your body is still, nothing is, that person needs to have that dignity protected for sure, as a matter of undoing it. I don't know. I just riffed again. I keep making this about myself, but you're making me think of a lot.
Yeah, I mean that's the point of the conversation, is uh, to ultimately get to greater understanding. And I feel like, yeah, it's been such a big part of your experience that how could you not make more connections? And especially talking to someone like me who's been on the other side of it. And yeah, it's a blessing and a curse to get to understand these things, because it's been my experience that I understand the fabric of life in a way that
Yes, that's very true. Yeah.
um, that's probably more true to the way that um, it's intended to be and felt, which is that there's incredible miracles and sensitivities and things that happen in the world that I forget. There's a poem that you like, but it's like, what's the one about, I would basically saying like how terrible it would be not to be sensitive, you know, to
Hmm.
not feel the atrocities of the world. And
Hmm.
um, it's people that I think we ultimately came here for. Is like that's how we understand ourselves mostly, is through others and um, maybe God in the universe, but ultimately it's in relation to others that we learn the most about ourselves, I think. And there's a there's a
Yeah.
lot to be said about that, about just being able to sit in the depths of someone else's suffering and uh, and learn a lot about yourself, because
Yeah. Yeah.
ultimate
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. And my own tidbit about it is like, um, ultimately people are very interesting and everyone has a story to share, and so much of our even creative processes are about sharing some of that story. And
Mm,
I find that it's cool to be a person sensitive enough to actually be able to put yourself inside their shoes, or to really sit and understand their struggles. Like, if there's one thing that as a practitioner I probably did better than my peers through
mm,
university, was like,
mm,
I'm dumb enough to actually just be present to knowing what question to ask next, because I'm curious. I'm like, wow, like that's fascinating to me. Like, I've never lived that way. I've also, it's the same reason why I don't think I need to like travel the globe every other week, chasing
mhm.
something, because I can just have a conversation with another person and get to experience and understand things
Yes,
almost
I feel the
more
same
in
way.
depth than as if I were to travel.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I just, you're saying like the importance of sitting with somebody in pain. I just feel like I hear this all the time in this modern self-help industrial complex lexicon of New York Times best-selling truisms that don't help anybody, that I just am totally opposed to, because my bag, having grieved the things that I've grieved and experienced and witnessed the miracles and all these things in my life, is that there's something so isolating about the way that we talk. There's something disgusting, frankly, unacceptable, ungodly, if I'm allowed to say that, about the way that we tolerate people and their stories. Treating people like it's too heavy is bullshit. How dare somebody say that to somebody sick, as if as if any of us are experiencing anything unique under the sun whatsoever. Abandonment, sickness, terror, grief are all the same thing. And to make somebody feel, because if I mean, you can't win them all, but if you have not tried to stretch yourself, force somebody else to stop thinking about your fucking self, I don't know. I think that's a problem. And I just think that there's so much wisdom, there's so much healing to be done if you lend yourself. And this challenges me because I was little miss, little miss people pleaser, little miss, little miss. What term am I looking for in the psychology lexicon? Parentified child. And everyone's like, and yes, there was plenty of that, and it was awful. But I am supported enough to heal that. And it is possible to heal that pain and get to the other side of it enough to recover wisdom that I can use for good in my life. I don't have to boundary myself to death and Google myself to death to the point where I can't even, just because my capacity to support somebody was taxed when I was a child, does not mean that I can't heal that and lend it to somebody else. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just think that there's a way, there's an analog to what you experienced, what my mom experienced, what Black Sheep's experienced, and this internalized self-doubt that a lot of creative people have. I'm broken. I have a fear of being seen. Horse shit. You do. You do not have the right environment. And that the destructive nature of the environment is controlled, of course, by the family, or the family that raised us like wild animals and didn't know how to support us as children, but also the collective. But I feel like something as true as the stuff that we're talking about, the solution is powerful and possible. That's the way I think, though. I'm like, oh yeah, we can change the world, no sweat. Miracles, yeah, we just lock in. But that's me.
Well, this will be the thing that I leave us with, is that, so the last and final thing that I wrote about this thing about tensegrity yesterday was, so if one person changes their typical response, it gives everyone the possibility of change. And so that is ultimately a miracle, that if you're the one disrupting, you're changing your response to something, and you gift everyone else the opportunity to undo their pattern as well. And will people always meet it? Absolutely not. That's insane to expect that. But in the disruption of doing something differently, you are ultimately changing the world. Like, that is
It's massive.
what people fail to acknowledge, that if you change the way that you're interacting with the world, it ultimately gives everyone the opportunity to change. And with enough ripples in the
Yeah,
water
it goes
over
faster than we
time,
think. It doesn't have to be this esoteric nonsense where it's like, oh, if we just say it conceptually, then it doesn't happen. You can do it. You can do it. And
it,
somebody said a comment about the warrior spirit. Yeah, man, lock in, bro. You can do that. Get over yourself with love. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
no, that's all I got.
Oh,
I got to get back to the treatment space, I think. So,
okay.
um,
Well, tell people where they can find you and what, I mean, obviously you can talk, but like, how can you help the creative people in my environment?
you can find me on Instagram, Tai Chi Cowboy.acu for acupuncture. And if you guys have any questions, just DM me. I'd be happy to respond to anything that you have. I'll eventually, yeah. The thing about ripples, just answer that question before I go, is like um, your change in your response creates a ripple in the water. And then if you've ever seen a lake, when you skip a rock, there starts to be reflexive, like circular things that happen and hit eventually, whether it's
Hmm.
another tide or another ripple or another wave. And that's how everyone can add to changing and raising the level of consciousness for humanity, planet,
Yeah.
universe, etc.
Yeah. Dr. Pedretti is not used to being online like I am, but Dr. Pedretti also offers virtual consultations, body work, all types of stuff. So you can do that. You forget to pub yourself, but I'm not afraid to. It's worth it. Cool. All right. Thank you, everyone. The live will be posted in one way or the other shortly. But thanks for being here. This was a very autistic conversation.
Very.
All right. Bye, nerds. Bye
Ciao.
bye.